Hey everyone, this is a video to try to help with the drama exam on what you need to study. We'll go over a PowerPoint and the study guide. Um, some big things, you'll have some essay questions on this one that I'll need to grade, so your grade won't match immediately. And I'll need to go through the exams on this one. So let us share the screen real quick. We do have in the module at the end near the assignments, you have the study guide for the Frankenstein exam. We'll go over in the PowerPoint the history of how Frankenstein was written, some things you need to keep in mind. What is Walton like? Remember fire symbolism. We'll get to that in the PowerPoint. Some things you need to think about. What put Victor on the path to natural philosophy? As you can see here, we have a good timeline of the story. Um, Part of it was, his father saying no. Part of it was his professors, one of them saying no, that it's a horrible idea, the other encouraging it, and think about everything that really brought him to that path. Um, we'll discuss some potential reasons for the creature's unnatural eyes, some things to think about, the creature being compared to Adam, the first creation. Um, the two written questions will be purely opinion based, but you'll look at, do we become monsters when we fight them? Why or why not? Support it with the text. And then, is the creature real to you? Why or why not? Again, support it with the text. And then you can see the events of the book here with the study guide. So make sure to double check them as you go through. All right, looking at the PowerPoint. The subtitle of Frankenstein is The Modern Prometheus. We had talked a little bit in the previous videos that Prometheus is the Titan who stole fire from Zeus to give to humans and then was punished by Zeus by being chained to a rock and having his liver eaten out every single day. And then it would regrow. That was his punishment until Hercules came to rescue him. So this story is by Mary Wollstonecraft Godwin Shelley, long name. Mary Wollstonecraft was a abolitionist, but more so a feminist writer, and she married William Godwin, who was big among the literary scene as well. She died not long after giving birth, only a few days after giving birth to Mary Shelley, so she really didn't get to know her mom for very long. Because of uh, being in the 1800s and all of that. She didn't have a normal education, but Godwin, made sure that she had all the books that she needed. She grew up in a literary society with all the different literary people coming around, and that's where she met Percy Bysshe Shelley. At the time, he was already married with a child, and he ended up leaving his wife for her. It was a really sad circumstance. They lived together for a while, and then his wife committed suicide and killed the baby as well. And that's what led him to be free to marry Mary Shelley. Um, she and he did have children. Many of them did not survive either, due to natural illness and things like that. Percy eventually dies by he was in a boat with a friend and they were lost at sea. When we get to the creation of Frankenstein, this started because her half sister Claire, John Polidori, her other half sister Fanny, Lord Byron, and Percy were all stuck in a cabin one night during in Switzerland during a storm. And since they had nothing else they could do, they couldn't really go outside. Lord Byron suggested they have a contest of who could write the best ghost story. Percy tried to write some poetry, he never quite finished it. Same with Lord Byron. John Polidori ended up writing The Vampire, and Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein. Now, Polidori's The Vampire came out after Frankenstein, so she was the first of the successful um, to complete the competition. Lord Byron was dating Claire at the time, and Polidori had a thing with Fanny. So those were kind of just some interesting relationships with each other. But Lord Byron, you can see a lot of we call it in the romantic hero, the Byronian hero. He is usually very moody and depressed, very almost one might say emo or gothic if you were characterizing him by today's standards, very obsessed with mortality and death, very obsessed with nature. Um, that is all the romanticism. Uh, but you can see by this characterization, and it's all based on Lord Byron. And if you study Lord Byron and his personality and such like that, then you can start to see where Dr. Frankenstein, Mary Shelley's character, has a lot of uh, elements about him that make him seem like he's based on Lord Byron. And many people like to tease about him being based on Lord Byron. So we had said subtitle The Modern Prometheus. We also get in one myth that Prometheus is the creator of humans. So he's not just life giver because he gives us fire, but he's also life giver because he creates us humans in some myths. So one thing to think about is comparing the myth of Prometheus to the myth of or not the myth, the story of Frankenstein. How is Dr. Frankenstein Prometheus's life giver? How is he, compared to God, like with Milton? How is the creature compared to the humans? How is the creature compared to Adam, the first human? These are some themes to watch out for throughout the novel: life and consciousness and existence. Obviously, we see a lot of this through the giving of life as well as the taking away of life. But what is the creation of consciousness? How is it separate from life? We get this, and especially the controversy of existence that Frankenstein starts to realize when he's tasked with creating the female creation, and that he finally realizes that what he was doing was not just bestowing life, but bestowing consciousness and existence and critical thinking upon a creature. And that's where he starts to question whether it's a good idea or not that he should um, create the second creature because she might think for herself. And a lot of that also has some questioning because obviously, again, Mary Shelley's mother was a feminist, and there one of the questions is of this time period in the feminist movement is if we bestow these certain powers on women, like the right to vote, the right to do things themselves, separate of their fathers and husbands, what will they do? What will they choose to do that we'll have no control over? So that is definitely played into the idea of consciousness and existence, at least with the second creature. We know Frankenstein, with his first creation, did not really think about that stuff. He just was one track mind on giving life to something. Big theme of science, but also where science goes, when does science go too far? At the time period, this is the beginning of science fiction. Mary Shelley is the mother of science fiction. This is the first true novel. It predates the novels of, say, um, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea and such like that, that we consider them, the fathers of science fiction. Well, Mary Shelley came before all that, and she is really the mother of science fiction. So part of that is wondering, when does science go too far? As Frankenstein constantly is trying to impress upon Walton, but also what will science give us? I'm sure just as Frankenstein himself is focused on his mother coming back, you know, Shelley never got a chance to know her mother, their loss of their children. Those all would be reasons to focus on what are the limitations of science? When does science go too far? What do we have to think about if we were, the ethical considerations, if we were to do science like this of giving life to things? Appearances is a big theme because, even when the creature is able to speak eloquently, it's his appearance that causes him to be judged, even though Frankenstein is the one who commits atrocities of bringing this creature to life, of doing things. He's accepted in society because he looks like everyone else. That also gives a theme of the other, just because of the appearances. Now, in the novel, when he's creating the first creature, Frankenstein mentions that it was due to the delicate nature of human um, veins and everything like that, all the small little bits, that he decided to basically upsize the creature to make it easier for him to get through. So he uses not just human parts either. He One reason why the creature's eyes were probably yellow could have been jaundice in the original uh eyes, but also that they could have been using animal eyes. Revenge is a key theme. This is definitely following the revenge plots of earlier times, of you do something to me, so I'm going to take revenge against you. But not just by, you harm me, so I harm you directly. It I'm going to harm you in a way that makes you regret. So the revenge of watching Frankenstein watching his family be destroyed by the creature. A theme of family, not just because Frankenstein has one and the creature doesn't, but what does it take to be a family? Exploration, again, this is a romantic novel, so the idea of far off places and going into nature, that's all a very big part. Obviously, when Frankenstein is most upset about William's death is when he goes into the mountains, and that's where he finds the creature. But there are multiple times throughout the novel that he talks about the nature and describes the beauty of it. A big theme of language and communication. I remember when we had talked about this theme in the short story section, that just because you have language and you're communicating doesn't mean people are listening. And that's a big thing with the creature, is he's trying to communicate, but no one's willing to listen because of his appearances. But also even Frankenstein isn't entirely willing to listen to him either. There is a theme of compassion and forgiveness or lack thereof. Try to look for that. Obviously, a theme of sacrifice. The creature tries to make, sacrifices himself. Like, well, I'll stay away from mankind. I'll do all kinds of stuff. Obviously, ultimately, when the novel ends, he claims that he is going to end his own life and sacrifice it now that everything's done. Victor makes sacrifices, his family makes sacrifices. So that is definitely in there. Lies and deceit, not just because of Victor lying to people about what's going on, but creature as well learns deceit. Secrecy, obviously. Fate and free will. We talked a little bit about this with the consciousness of, especially when Victor is thinking about the second creature and wondering what are they going to do together? Is she going to follow by the rules that the first creature has established? Is she going to stay with him or not want to? What is her free will? But also think about the fact that Victor throughout the novel claims that everything that happened to him was his destiny, that he had no choice. He was just destined for everything. Think about the times that he did have choices. He could have listened to others about not following natural philosophy. He made choices throughout the novel. He could have made the choice to save Justine and tell the truth, but he did not. Um, so he had free will, he had choice, and yet usually when he has a choice, he acts like he doesn't have a choice. So characterization, these are most of the characters. The big ones I want you to focus on are characterization of Victor. As I already said, he's very much similar to Lord Byron, but think about his characterization in general. Think about Roberts. How is he like Victor in some ways? Um, Mr. and Mrs. Frankenstein, he grew up in a privileged household, so much so that, Elizabeth Lavenza, she's saved because she's beautiful, and Mrs. Frankenstein always believed that she would want to be with Victor. So this again, it's not just in the creation of other creatures, but we get this idea of free will. Mr. and Mrs. Frankenstein adopt her out of, they act like out of the goodness of their heart, leaving the rest of her family to starve and have issues. And they only save her because she's beautiful. There's again a thing of appearances. They don't take into account her want of free will. When Mrs. Frankenstein dies, Elizabeth is the one who takes over as the female head of the house, taking care of everyone. None of this was what she wanted. It was thrust upon her. Henry as a foil for Victor, he's very much more into the humanities than the sciences, but also think about how he acts, what he says helps reveal more of the character, especially of Victor's characterization. And again, Robert and Victor are very similar. Robert maybe still the glory hound as Victor is because he wants to be known for discovering the North Pole, but maybe to a lesser extent of wanting to be crazy about where he goes with science. So Victor is a good and Robert are good to play against each other since they're both men of science. All right, let me see if there's anything else. Okay, the last things to think about, I want you to think about um, the natural phenomena throughout the story that could be seen as symbols. Think about how every time there is one of the elements mentioned, it's got both good and bad. Air can, is what gives us life through the oxygen in the air that we breathe, but it can also, think about it, it's also a damaging thing through strong gusty winds and tornadoes and hurricanes. Earth has the ability to be good, it grows food, but also bad through earthquakes. Water. The big one, though, obviously fire and lightning. Um, Lightning happens that causes fire, that the creature discovers fire. Is very much our modern Prometheus. But it's also a symbol because again, fire is good because it gives heat, it cooks our food, it's a life giver, but it also can take life away and burn. Uh, let's see. Anything else? Basically, um, again, refer to the story itself. The books that the creature really fell in love with is Paradise Lost. This one I mentioned just to explain what it is. Paradise Lost is an epic poem that was written by Milton, and it details the fall of first Satan and the archangels that joined Satan, and then the fall of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, and how their paradise was lost because of the fight with Satan. Prior to Milton, in the late after the Viking invasion, early Middle Ages, there the idea of Satan began. He is not in the original Bible. So this was a chance to characterize the story for people to see what was the story. And a lot of our ideas of the fall of Satan come from Paradise Lost. Think about for the creature being compared to Adam, what does the creature want? Um, think about whose fault different things are. For example, Felix is the one who decides you know, for everyone that he's going to help Sapphi's father escape prison, which ends up leading them to lose their fortune and be exiled. So the entire DeLacy family is affected by Felix's decision. Not unlike how the entire Frankenstein family is affected by Victor's decision. Even Henry and Elizabeth, all of them, all of their deaths are because of Frankenstein. Uh, let's see. So it is a science fiction, and a big thing is the lesson to learn from the end of Frankenstein. Uh, think about those. There's a couple of questions about the creature itself leaving clues. Why would, you know, what lessons do we learn from this? And how language affects your perception of the creature. Like, usually in movies, when we see Frankenstein's creation, it it's more like a zombie and it doesn't really speak. So now that you know from the novel that he does speak, how does that change things for you? And then last thing to think about is what does it mean to be a monster? And who do you think the real monster is in Frankenstein? All right. So that should help you with the novel exam. Good luck. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out.